Imagine a young, arrogant executive at the peak of his career, mocking an elderly cashier for being slow and obsolete. He thought he was putting a nobody in her place. What he didn't know was that the woman he just humiliated held a secret that would shatter his entire world. She wasn't just a cashier. She was the owner's mother. This is the story of how one moment of cruel arrogance led to the most humbling lesson of his life. If you believe that true strength comes from humility and that everyone deserves respect, then you need to see how this story ends. Subscribe now and hit the notification bell, because we bring you powerful tales of karma, redemption, and the moments that change people forever. This story of humility and hidden power is connecting with people all over the world. We're curious. Which country are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments and show your country some love. The line at the Auramart self-checkout was a river of impatience, and Liam Thorne was its king. At 28, he was the golden boy of a viral marketing firm, a man who believed the world operated on a simple binary, winners and losers. And winners in his world did not wait in lines. They did not bag their own groceries. They certainly did not interact with the obsolete human infrastructure of a discount supermarket. His uniform was a uniform of success, a tailored athleisure jacket, designer jeans, and an air of contempt so thick you could taste it. He was on his phone, his voice a carrying performative drone about quarterly projections and influencer metrics, ensuring everyone in earshot understood they were in the presence of someone important. And directly in his path was the obstacle to his important life, an elderly cashier at the one open-staffed lane, her movements deliberate, careful, almost slow. Her name tag read Eleanor. She was carefully scanning a collection of coupons for a young mother with a toddler on her hip, her hands gnarled and veined, moving with a steady patience that seemed to infuriate Liam with every passing second. He let out an exaggerated sigh, loud enough to draw glances. The young mother ignored him, focusing on her child. Eleanor, however, met his gaze for a fleeting second, her eyes a calm, deep brown, offering a slight, apologetic smile. This only made him angrier. Her register was the old, slow kind. Each beep was a punctuation mark in his agony. The final straw was a jar of baby food that wouldn't scan. "It's 2 for 1 this week," the young mother said softly. "I just have one," Eleanor nodded. "That's no problem, dear. I'll just manually enter the code. It'll just take a moment." A moment. To Liam, it was an eternity. He shifted his weight, his phone now held loosely at his side. "You know," he said, his voice dripping with a condescension he believed was wit, "there's a reason these jobs are going extinct. It's called efficiency. Maybe if you moved a little faster, the line wouldn't be a pilgrimage." The air went cold. The young mother looked down, embarrassed for him. Other customers shifted uncomfortably. Eleanor did not flinch. She finished entering the code, handed the receipt to the mother, and wished her a good day. Then she turned her full attention to Liam. Her expression wasn't one of anger, but of a profound, almost pitying disappointment. "I'm sorry for the wait, sir," she said, her voice clear and steady, devoid of any tremor. "How may I help you?" Liam strode forward, dumping his basket onto the conveyor belt. It held a single item, a bottle of overpriced alkaline water. "Just this. And try to keep up, yeah?" He flashed a grin at the person behind him, seeking complicity but found none. Eleanor picked up the bottle, her movements still unhurried. She scanned it. The machine beeped. "That will be $4.50. Liam tapped his smartwatch on the payment terminal. It declined. He tapped it again. Decline. A flush crept up his neck. "It's your machine. It's garbage." "Perhaps try again, sir," Eleanor said, her hands resting gently on the belt. He fumbled for his wallet, pulling out a credit card. Swipe. Decline. The universe was conspiring to humiliate him. Now he was the one holding up the line. The irony was a bitter pill. Finally, he found a crumpled $5 bill in his pocket and slapped it on the counter. Eleanor took it, smoothed it out with a quiet dignity that made his gesture seem even more childish, and opened the cash drawer. She counted out his change with painstaking care. 50 cents is your change, sir," she said, placing 2 quarters directly into his palm, her touch cool and brief. "I do hope the rest of your day is as pleasant as you are." It was the perfect polished strike. Liam snatched his water, his face a mask of fury. "This is why you're stuck in a dead-end job for minimum wage. You have no ambition, no drive." He leaned in, delivering his final cruel assessment. "You're a fossil." He turned and marched out of the store, not knowing that the woman he had just belittled was Eleanor Thorne. Not just a cashier, the matriarch of the Thorne family, the woman who had built a small grocery store into a regional empire with her late husband, the majority shareholder of Oromart, and the mother of the man who would sign Liam's paychecks. The automatic doors hissed shut behind Liam, sealing him in his bubble of self-satisfaction. He took a swig of the alkaline water, the crisp, overpriced taste feeling like a victory. He had put that slow, insignificant woman in her place. It was a small skirmish in his daily war against inefficiency, and he had won. Back inside the Oromart, the air was still thick with the aftermath of his presence. A young man in line muttered, "What a jerk," to his friend. The young mother with the toddler gave Eleanor a sympathetic look. But Eleanor Thorne was not looking for sympathy. Her expression had shifted from patient disappointment to something far more formidable, resolve. The insult itself was a pebble. It was his philosophy, his utter contempt for the people who formed the backbone of everyday life, that she found intolerable. She finished checking out the remaining customers with the same gentle efficiency, but her mind was already miles away, in a corner office on the top floor of the Oromart corporate headquarters. When her shift ended, she didn't change out of her simple blue smock. She walked out to the parking lot, not to one of the beat-up sedans the other cashiers drove, but to a pristine, understated luxury sedan. She slid into the driver's seat, the soft leather a stark contrast to her work clothes. She drove not to a small apartment, but to a gated property overlooking the city, a home she had shared with her late husband Arthur for 40 years. Inside, she poured herself a single cup of tea, carried it to her study, and sat behind a large solid oak desk. On it sat a framed photograph of her and Arthur, standing outside their very first store, all hopeful smiles and worn-out overalls. She picked up her phone, a simple model, and pressed a single speed dial number. It was answered on the second ring. "Mom, everything all right?" The voice on the other end was deep, calm, and laced with immediate concern. It was her son, Daniel Thorne, the current CEO of Oromart. "Everything is fine, Daniel," she said, her voice even. "But I need a favor, a personnel matter." She could almost hear him straightening up in his chair. Her favors were rare and never trivial. "Of course. What is it?" "There's a young man named Liam Thorne. He works at the Viral Vanguard marketing firm. I believe they are a new contractor of ours." Daniel was silent for a moment, processing. "Yes, they are. We just brought them on to overhaul our social media presence. They come highly recommended." "Why, what's he done?" Eleanor took a slow sip of her tea. "He has a theory about the world, Daniel. He believes that people are defined solely by their job title and their speed. He believes that those he deems slow are obsolete, fossils in the path of progress." She paused, letting the words hang. "He shared this theory with me today, at my register." The line went so quiet she thought the call had dropped. Then she heard a low, controlled exhale. She knew her son. She knew the quiet, simmering anger that was now coursing through him. The Thornes built their empire on respect, for their customers, for their products, and most importantly, for their employees. To hear that one of their own contractors had verbally assaulted his own mother, a company shareholder, while she worked incognito on the front lines, a practice she had maintained for years to stay connected to the business's heart, was an unforgivable sin. "What would you like me to do, Mum?" Daniel's voice was now all business, cold and sharp. Eleanor's eyes drifted to the photograph of her and Arthur. "I don't want him fired from his job. Not yet. That teaches him nothing. I want him to learn. I want him to understand the weight of the world he so easily dismisses." She outlined her plan, simple and devastating. "Call his boss. Tell him we have a special, hands-on project for their star employee. We're calling it Project Humility, and it starts tomorrow." Liam Thorne arrived at the Oromart corporate headquarters the next morning with a simmering resentment that he mistook for professional obligation. The building was a stunning glass and steel monument to modern commerce, a far cry from the grubby discount store he'd been in yesterday. He'd received a baffling call from his CEO, a man usually reserved for congratulating seven-figure client acquisitions. "Thorne, big opportunity. Oromart leadership wants you personally for a deep-dive branding project. Okay, it's hands-on. Don't ask questions, just do whatever they say. This account is worth millions." The call ended before Liam could protest. So here he was, dressed in another $1,000 outfit, feeling profoundly out of place. He was a creator of digital campaigns, not a grunt. A stern-faced assistant met him in the minimalist lobby and escorted him not to a creative think tank, but to a stark, windowless conference room. The only thing on the polished table was a single folded bundle of fabric. It was an Oromart employee uniform, a blue smock, identical to the one the old cashier had been wearing. On top of it was a note, written in elegant, precise handwriting. Project Humility, Phase 1, Understanding the Foundation. Put this on. Your guide will be here shortly. Liam stared at the uniform as if it were contaminated. This was a joke. A test of some kind, a prank. Before he could decide, the door opened. A man walked in. He was in his late 40s, with a quiet, commanding presence and sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was dressed in a flawlessly tailored suit that probably cost more than Liam's monthly rent. This was clearly an executive. Liam stood up straighter, ready to discuss demographics and engagement rates. The man introduced himself as Daniel Thorne, CEO. Liam's heart skipped a beat. The man himself. This was a test. They must have heard about his innovative work and wanted to see his process from the ground up. A bizarre corporate rite of passage. "Mr. Thorne," Liam began, his voice oozing newfound respect. "It's an honor. I'm ready to dive deep into the Oromart brand essence." Daniel Thorne didn't smile. He looked at the uniform, then back at Liam. "The brand essence," he repeated, his tone flat. "It starts there. Put it on." "You have 60 seconds. The command was absolute." Swallowing his pride, Liam slipped the smock on over his expensive clothes. He felt ridiculous, the cheap polyester a personal insult. Daniel gave him a slow, appraising look. "Follow me." He led Liam out of the conference room, not to an executive suite, but back down to the lobby and through a series of sterile corridors that led to the operational heart of the building. They arrived at a massive, bustling warehouse, the distribution center that supplied the entire regional chain. The noise was deafening. Forklifts beeping, conveyor belts whirring, the shouts of workers. The air was cold and smelled of cardboard and diesel. Daniel stopped at a station where a woman was manually sorting returned items with dizzying speed. "This is Maria," Daniel said, his voice cutting through the din. "She's been with Oromart for 20 years. She supports 3 children and put her brother through college. Your task is to work with her for the next 8 hours. You will sort returns, you will check for damages, and you will listen." Liam stared, his mind reeling. "Sir, with all due respect, my expertise is in digital brand strategy. This is manual labor. I don't see the correlation." Daniel Thorne turned, and for the first time his eyes held a glint of something dangerous. "The correlation, Mr. Thorne, is that without Maria, and without thousands like her, there is no brand. There is no multi-million-dollar account. There is nothing. You are here to learn that the foundation of this company isn't a clever slogan. It is people. You mocked one of them yesterday. Now you will work alongside them." He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping to a whisper that chilled Liam to the bone. "And if I hear one word of complaint, if you so much as sigh with that famous impatience of yours, your firm's contract will be terminated before you can even form an apology. Do we understand each other?" Liam could only nod, his mouth dry. The CEO knew. This wasn't a project. It was a punishment. The 8 hours in the distribution center were a form of torture Liam's privileged life had never prepared him for. It wasn't just the physical strain, the ache in his lower back from standing, the paper cuts from cardboard, the chill that seeped into his bones. It was the psychological dismantling. Maria, the sorter, was a master of her craft. She moved with an economy of motion that was both efficient and graceful, her hands a blur as she identified, categorized, and routed a relentless river of returned merchandise. Liam, by contrast, was all clumsy, fumbling hesitation. He misread labels, placed items on the wrong conveyor belts, and twice nearly caused a minor logistical jam that earned him a sharp, but not unkind correction from a forklift driver. Maria was patient. She showed him the tricks, how to read the codes, how to feel for damage without opening a box, how to pace himself. She didn't speak much, but when she did, it was with a quiet authority. "This isn't a job you think your way through," she said at one point, watching him overthink a stack of small appliances. "It's a job you feel. You learn the rhythm." Liam, who had built a career on thinking his way through everything, was failing at feeling a rhythm. During their mandated lunch break, sitting at a scarred plastic table in the cavernous break room, Maria finally asked, "So what did you do to get sentenced to the warehouse?" Liam looked up from his limp cafeteria sandwich, startled. "What?" "Nobody from corporate comes down here for brand immersion in a smock," she said, a faint smile touching her lips. "You screwed up. Big time. So what was it? Embezzlement? Sexist comment in a meeting?" Liam felt a hot wave of shame. He looked down at his hands, noticing a fresh cut on his thumb. "I was disrespectful," he mumbled. "To a cashier? At one of the stores?" Maria nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "Ah," she said. "One of the obsolete ones." His own word echoed back at him in this place of pure, unglamorous utility, and it sounded so hollow, so stupid. He couldn't meet her gaze. "Something like that." Maria finished her coffee. "You know, my son, he's a lot like you. Thinks the world runs on apps and ideas. Forgets that someone has to unload the truck that brings the phone he designed. Someone has to stock the shelves. Someone has to ring him up." She stood, collecting her tray. A tree with big, fancy leaves is nothing without its roots. And the roots work in the dark. She walked away, leaving him with the echo of her words. The rest of the shift passed in a blur of aching muscles and humbling lessons. When the final whistle blew, Liam was almost too tired to feel relieved. But as he shuffled out, expecting to be released, Daniel Thorne was waiting for him again, his expression as inscrutable as ever. "Phase 1 is complete," Daniel said, his voice cutting through Liam's fatigue. "Now for Phase 2. He led a protesting Liam to a waiting car. They didn't speak during the short drive. When the car stopped, Liam's heart sank. They were parked in the familiar lot of the very Automat, where this had all begun. "No," Liam whispered, but it was too late. Inside, he was introduced to Brenda, the no-nonsense head cashier. "Brenda will be training you on Register 3 for the evening shift," Daniel stated. "The same register Eleanor works." The name hung in the air between them. Liam was being made to stand in the exact spot of the woman he had mocked. Brenda was a tough teacher. She drilled him on produce codes, on the exact procedure for processing checks, on how to deactivate a security tag without setting off the alarm. He was slow, painfully slow. The line began to form, and he felt the impatient energy he had once radiated now directed at him. He fumbled with coins, typed in wrong codes, and had to call Brenda over for help repeatedly. He saw the irritation on customers' faces, the rolled eyes, the muttered comments. He was living the experience he had deemed worthless. And with every frustrated sigh from a customer, every beep of a mis-scanned item, the weight of his own arrogance pressed down on him, heavier than any box in the warehouse. The final customer of his shift was an elderly man who paid with exact change, counting out pennies with trembling, slow hands. A week ago, Liam would have been seething. Now he just waited, his own hands resting on the counter, his head bowed. He saw the man's patience, his focus on a simple task, and he saw dignity, not slowness. When the man left, Liam began the closing procedures Brenda had taught him, his movements weary but deliberate. The store was quiet now, the harsh daytime light softened. As he was wiping down his register, he saw her. Eleanor. She was walking slowly down an aisle, not in her cashier's smock, but in a simple, elegant wool coat, carrying a leather handbag. She was conducting a final walkthrough, her eyes noting the stock levels, the cleanliness of the floors, the small details that made a store a community hub. She was every inch the owner, not the employee. Liam's breath caught in his throat. This was the moment he had been dreading and somehow craving. He had to speak to her. He couldn't let this end with him just slinking away. He walked toward her, his steps echoing in the quiet vastness of the store. She heard him approach and turned, her expression calm, waiting. He stopped a few feet from her, unable to find the clever, polished words that usually came so easily. All he had was the raw, unvarnished truth. "Eleanor," he began, his voice rough with emotion. I don't have an excuse. There is no excuse for what I said to you." He looked down at his own hands, now slightly chapped and stained from a day of real work. "I was taught a very hard lesson today. I worked in the distribution center with Maria. I stood at that register." He gestured back to the lane, his voice trembling. "And I was terrible at it. I was slow. I made mistakes. I felt the impatience of people who saw me as nothing more than an obstacle. And I realized, that's what I did to you. I reduced you to an obstacle." He finally forced himself to meet her gaze. I called you a fossil, but the truth is, I'm the one who was living in a dead world, a world of screens and numbers where I thought I was better than everyone else. Maria, Brenda, you are the foundation. You are what makes everything else possible. I am so profoundly sorry. The apology hung in the air between them, simple and stark. Eleanor studied him for a long moment, her wise eyes taking in his slumped shoulders, his genuine remorse. She saw not the arrogant boy from yesterday, but a humbled man standing before her today. An apology is a beginning, Liam, she said, her voice soft but firm. But understanding is the goal. You were not punished today. You were educated. This company was built by hands like yours are tonight, tired, honest, and willing to learn. She turned to leave, then paused, looking back at him. You have talent. Your CEO at Viral Vanguard says you are brilliant. But brilliance without humility is a dangerous, fragile thing. It shatters at the first touch of reality. Now you have a choice. You can go back to your old life and forget this ever happened, or you can take this lesson and become someone who builds things that last, someone who leads with respect. The choice is yours. She gave him a final slight nod, then walked away, disappearing through the manager's office door. Liam stood alone in the quiet store, her words settling deep within him. He didn't feel angry or resentful. He felt clean, like a storm had passed through him and washed away the poison of his own arrogance. He walked out of the Auramart into the cool night air, a different man from the one who had entered. He had been forced to his knees, not by a person, but by a perspective. And in that humbled position, for the first time in his life, he finally saw the world clearly.